Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast, hosted by me, Jen Trechek.
And me, Aileen Rutledge.
This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of occupational therapy, sharing the latest research and techniques and providing insights into the many ways that occupational therapy can help people of all ages live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Whether you are a practicing occupational therapist, a student of occupational therapy, or simply curious about this fascinating field, this podcast is for you. We'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing stories from the front lines of occupational therapy practice, and providing tips and advice for anyone looking to get the most out of their therapy.
So sit back, relax, and join us on this exciting journey into the world of occupational therapy in Ireland. So today on the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast, we are going over the border into Northern Ireland to two of the most established private occupational therapists in Northern Ireland, I think. We've got Corinna Keaney and Margaret McEvoy, who banded together and formed Occupational Therapy Northern Ireland, which is a network across the north. And I don't know whether you guys are coming into the south or not, but you're very welcome today to the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast, guys.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Aileen.
Welcome, guys.
So tell us a little bit about Occupational Therapy Northern Ireland. You provide services across a kind of a range of areas of occupational therapy and occupational health.
Yeah, so we, as you said, Jen, we provide a range of occupational therapy services across Northern Ireland, from adults to paediatrics. Occupational health is It's developing. It's become very busy over the last little while. It really started for us. It started during the pandemic, where employers and employees were trying to get back to work, and they were just looking for more advice. You know, obviously you had a lot more conditions kind of becoming apparent during that time. Long COVID obviously being the very obvious one, but lots of other conditions, particularly neurodiversity, became a big concern for people. So that's a big part of our service now, where we support employees and employers, getting people back to work, but also remaining in work if they've got a long-term condition. So it's not always about people who are off sick. It's also about helping people who are in work remain in work. So we also, as occupational therapists, we support adults in their homes and in their communities. We provide a plethora of paediatric services as well, from assessment and advice and treatment for parents. And we do provide case management, which is a service which basically supports people with catastrophic injuries after, normally an accident, but could be anything really, just helping them get the right support and rehabilitation and care in their homes. And for us, I suppose, as a case manager, it's really about kind of being that coordinator of, who's the best person to provide that piece of equipment or that physio or that rehab assistant or whatever. So we're there to kind of coordinate everything for them.
And Corinna, tell us more about how you bring the employer and the employees together. Can you explain how you collaborate with both parties and really help try to create that healthier and more productive work environment?
Yeah, so our referrals normally come directly from the employer, obviously with the employee's consent. So, someone has either disclosed a health condition or maybe they're off sick, or so the employer will obviously meet with the employee and then they come to us. And it's really about supporting both of them. So the employer, on the face of it, really, they want support and advice in terms of how to support that employee to come back to work or to remain in work. And normally what they say to us is we want to do the right thing. We don't want to make it worse, but we want them to be able to come back to work. And certainly the pandemic and the lockdowns showed people that actually we do want to be in work. So, before COVID, everybody would say, oh, I'd love a week off, or I'd love a month off, or even a year. And then when people had to be at home and not work, and they realized, you know what, I actually want to be in work. It's not just about the financial incentive, it's about interacting with people, and it's about having a routine and structure to your day. So that really helps. And that's where people do the majority of people want to be able to get back to work in some shape or form. So for us, we would assess the employee, and it's all about what they're able to do and looking at their job description and matching the two. And then we provide advice to the employer in terms of, right, Aideen can do X, but she can't do Y. But maybe she'll be able to do Y in a couple of months' time if we give her a little bit of support. So it can be sometimes about making just some temporary adjustments to their job role, or even the environment in where they work. And it's all about communication, really, and education. Education's a big thing, and particularly for the employer, so that they know how to support the employee. And it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship where your health can affect your ability to work, but work can also affect your health, particularly if you've got a long-term condition. So you don't want one exacerbating the other. So, and also sometimes it's even for the employee, it's about giving them a little bit of support and advice, and they'll go, I didn't know I could ask for that. I didn't know maybe I could ask for flexible working for a short period of time, or if you've been off work. A lot of people don't know that they can ask for a phased return back to work. That's a big thing. I had a client recently who was like, I thought he was off for 6 months, and he was like, I thought I had to come back full time. And I said, no, if you do that, you'll actually end up going back off again, and that doesn't help anybody. So it's just about supporting both of them.
And would employers contact you as well about proactive measures, and rather than waiting until people are actually off sick and things have gone wrong, are there many organizations seeking your support for that preventative measure approach, Corinna?
Yeah, we would get a lot of kind of pre-employment health questionnaires. So obviously before someone actually comes on board, they would fill in a health questionnaire. We'll have all done it for various jobs in the past. So if a health condition or functional difficulty or whatever is kind of mentioned in that, then the employer would come to us and start. And that's a really good idea, so right from the offset, you're supporting the employee, and the employee knows what support they will get. So it could be anything from as simple as an appropriate chair or a desk if someone's got a back problem, to other, obviously if you've got a long-term condition, then dependent on your job role, that could be this, this might fatigue Jen, but if she was to do it in this way, or maybe break it down more into smaller steps, she'll be able to do it. So it's just about advice like that. So prevention is a great thing, really. So as you said, get involved in those early days, and education. We do a lot of education for employers as well, and the team, obviously, with the employee's consent. So it could be on a condition like multiple sclerosis or neurodiversity. That's a big one now. So actually providing training and education so that the manager knows how they can help and what to expect, and what to expect from the employee, but also the team, because communication is really important. And sometimes you might work in a team and you go, well, Aideen's not doing that, but I have to do it. That's not fair. So actually understanding why Aideen's not able to do that, and how we can all support one another, because we can all do our jobs. We just sometimes have to do them a little bit differently.
Margaret, when I think about occupational health, quite often we think about doctors and consultants, and we might think about occupational health nurses giving injections. Occupational therapy, although it can get confused with occupational health, isn't always where we kind of think necessarily. How did you guys get into that field? How did you highlight to employers that occupational therapy has a role to play?
Well, when I worked in the NHS, the unit that I worked in had a work assessment service. So this was a unit, it was a brain injury unit, and our population, they were the age from 18 to 65. So of working age, work was hugely important to the majority of the clients there. So I suppose that gave me an insight into what our role was with this, in terms of occupational health. Occupations in our title. It's one of the everyday activities. So I really feel that OTs are best placed to support people return to work, particularly because one of the key areas of OT is activity analysis, where we break down each activity into the different steps that are required. So we look at not only the physical ability to work, we look at the cognitive capacity of the individual to work, we look at psychologically how they're managing, we look at the environment. That's another key role of occupational therapy. So I really feel that it fits very well within our profession. So then whenever I left the NHS and went into private practice, Corinna and I started to explore the role of occupational therapy in occupational health. We invested in a lot of training. We did the OBER functional capacity evaluation training. We attended various other trainings. Now they're all over, mainly in England and Scotland we have been to. And it was really an area that we felt very passionate about, because we could really see the benefit of occupational therapy within this area. So I don't know really how it started. We attended a long COVID summit. I think was it April or May of 2020, and there were other OTs on the summit, and we realized this is bread and butter OT, and this is trying to improve independence in an area, activity of daily living. So the long COVID summit sent us some information, and I knew a girl who worked in HR, and I sent her the information, and from that we started getting referrals in. Then we started becoming a bit more active on social media, highlighting the role of OT within occupational health. And really from that, it actually snowballed. And we started getting quite an influx of referrals. And really, yeah, it's quite a successful part of our business, fortunately.
So nice to marry up the two, because you're right, a lot of people, occupational health focuses on the individual and their capacity, whereas with OT we're looking much broader, right, at the job and, you know, what somebody can do rather than what they can't do, and how to move them forwards. Are there many OTs in this field doing occupational health, do you know?
In Northern Ireland there's not a lot, but over in England, Scotland and Wales there would be quite a number. We're actually part of a networking group. And there is an OT in England, Jo Vallam-Smith, and she has set up this OT for occupational health group, and we're part of that. And there's about 40 or 50, I think. So it's growing. I think more people are recognising more and more the role of OT. It happened a few years ago. I think it was just before COVID, right? Maybe 2019. The Royal College of OT joined up with the Society of Occupational Medicine, and I think it was the Vocational Rehab Association. They had a conference called Good Work for Good Health. And that really highlighted the role of occupational therapy. And in fact, in some GP practices in England, there are vocational rehabilitation clinics and OTs head that up.
And a new area of emerging practice. Are you aware of anyone in the Republic of Ireland working in this field?
Yeah, there's a few actually. We met at training. We know of a few occupational therapists, but not a lot.
So watch this space. Can you share, either of you, I'm just going to open this out to either of you, can you share a recent success story that really highlights the role of OT in this particular area?
Well, I had a man, he was in his early 50s, who had a stroke, but it really only affected his memory. And for him and for me, listening to him every day was almost like Groundhog Day. He just repeated the same thing over and over, but he was really passionate about getting back to work. On paper, when you did formal assessments, his Rivermead score was 0, really coming out at that severe end of memory impairment. But when you spoke to him about his job, he knew it inside out. Obviously, that was stored in his long-term memory. He had a fantastic employer. He had worked there, you know, from leaving school. So we met with the employer, we discussed his role, and we looked at what he could safely do and what was not appropriate. So in terms of what he could safely do, the employer thought that he could walk around the different sites of the area that he worked, and he would be able to, with a list, he would be able to complete some of the more basic tasks. So I went with him, we did a worksite assessment, I went out with him and he managed it, no problem at all. He was able to walk around the site, referred to his sheets and successfully completed all the tasks at the end of the day. So he did go back to work. Now it wasn't the work that he did before his stroke, but he was able to go back to work. It gave him a sense of purpose, and there was the financial reward at the end of it as well. His wife actually sent me a letter thanking me, because she said that him being able to go back to work actually lifted his mood. Improve his memory function, but the routine gave him that structure that he needed. And yeah, it was a success story.
Brilliant, Margaret. That's lovely. Corinna, what about you?
Yes, I had one recently. I just mentioned him briefly there. So he was a sales rep for a big company based here, but works across the whole island of Ireland. And he had been off for about 6 months. He'd gone off feeling very unwell and ended up being diagnosed with a cardiovascular condition. So that in itself frightened him, because he was in his late 50s, and it came as a bit of a shock. So he was coming to terms with that, and then wondering, would he ever get back to work? He'd been in that job for about 20 years, knew, as just like Margaret was talking about, her client, knew it inside and out, really loved it, really enjoyed being on the road and interacting with people. So he was referred to us because, you know, medically he was fit to go back to work, but he was really anxious, and his employer, certainly another great employer, very supportive of all their employees, but they wanted to make sure that they supported him in the right way and didn't ask him to do too much too quickly. And he was the chap who we put in place a phased return, and it was over a longer period of time. Normally a phased return might be 4 to 6 weeks. For him, we extended it for 8 weeks, and he took on, you know, a little bit of work initially, you know, on about kind of 50% of his hours, worked with his existing customers, no targets for new clients, anything like that, and just got used to being back on the road, driving around. He also felt a little bit conscious of the fact that he'd kind of abandoned his customers for 6 months, and he'd gone off very, very suddenly, and he was like, oh, he's going to have to build up relationships and stuff. But actually a really good planned phased return to work, and it went really smoothly. And then I reviewed him just as it was coming to an end, and he was the chap who said, I didn't even know that I could ask for this. You know, it was so successful, so smooth. He felt fine. He didn't feel under stress. He never felt overwhelmed at any point. And he knew then as well that if things ever changed with him, if he had any symptoms or whatever, that he could just go straight to his team leader and just say, look, I need to slow down things a little bit, or I need to make sure I take proper breaks. I think all of us, that's one of the things we're really guilty of, you know, when we're on a roll or we're under pressure, we don't take breaks. And that's a really important thing. So even just having somebody tell you, you must do this, it's okay. So he was delighted too, and he sent us a lovely testimonial, which is always good.
It's nice to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like those employers were very accommodating and very helpful. I'm just wondering, do you ever come across employers who are maybe less supportive, or, you know, how do you navigate that?
So when we do the assessment and we complete the report, obviously the employee can see the report before it's sent to the employer. When it goes to the employer, I have to say the majority of them accept our recommendations. We have had a few who have challenged them, and it is always difficult because the employer doesn't always understand the impact of the health condition on function. The employee may not want to give lots of information about their health condition, and they're not required to by law. So it's very difficult to make them aware of how debilitating the condition is without breaking the employee's consent. So generally what we do is we have a discussion with the employer, and if needs be, we will tell them that the employee is most likely covered under the Disability Discrimination Act, and that, you know, really reasonable adjustments should be made if it's within the organisation's capability. Obviously our report, its recommendations, that's all they are. And as I say, most of them accept them, but we have had a few that haven't accepted them. And in one case, it did lead to a failure. And that person really wasn't able to complete their job and went back off on sick leave again, which then obviously has repercussions for the employer in terms of cost, productivity, etc. So we try to make our recommendations as reasonable as possible, considering the size of the organisation. We can't ask a small corner shop to make thousands and thousands of pounds of adjustments, because obviously they wouldn't have the financial means to do that. But what we also do is we would refer the employers and the employees on to other services that can offer free support advice and financial grants, such as Access to Work, which is a government initiative here in Northern Ireland sponsored by the Department for Communities, and they can help with the costs of equipment such as a desk, a chair and software. Other organisations can come in and train the employers and employees, so that, for example, in terms of neurodiversity conditions, specialists are very good at coming in and supporting employees and employers. So I think it's, as Corinna said earlier, it is about communication, but it can be tricky if the employee hasn't consented to us disclosing what exactly the health condition is. But it can be difficult.
And I guess there might be some cases where the person and the job or the organisation are just not the right fit, I guess. It's finding the right job to support your health, isn't it?
That's it. And I mean, if it's a safety concern, you know, safety has to come first. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if we have an employee that we're assessing, they're in a safety critical role. So, for example, if it involves like working at heights and maybe the vertigo, if there's something that could cause an injury, you know, we would have to say they're not fit for that aspect of the job, whether the employee wants us to say it or not. So it is safety would always come first.
When I think of occupational health, ergonomics springs to mind. I'm sure that does for many people. Can you talk to us about the importance of that, the importance of the assessment process with the individual and the outcome of it, and how it can make a big difference to someone's productivity in work and their health in work?
Yeah, so when we talk about ergonomics, that's obviously an assessment of the workstation. Now that could be an office environment, it could be in an industrial setting. Now, to be honest, Keaney, you probably agree, most of ours are within an office environment. Mm-hmm. So when we complete an ergonomic assessment, we are assessing the employee at their desk. We're looking to see if the desk is at the right height. We are looking to see that the chair they're sitting on is offering them enough postural support. We are looking at the location of, for example, their computer, how many screens they're working from, where's their phone, do they do a lot of reading, so is their neck held in a flex position. So really we're looking at the demands of their job the workstation they're working on, and we're checking to make sure that it doesn't cause any potential hazards such as back pain, neck pain, repetitive tasks. Would the workstation cause the employee to be more susceptible to musculoskeletal issues? Would their computer setup cause wrist pain? Would it trigger carpal tunnel syndrome? So following on from our assessment, then we will make recommendations to what we think will support the employee at their workstation. And again, that could be something as simple as changing the type of chair they have to one that is, adjustable. So adjustable in height, adjustable in width, depth, armrest height. Does it have a neck support? Does it recline? We will look to see if the individual would benefit from a footstool under their desk. If the individual is complaining of back pain and they're having difficulty with, for example, prolonged sitting and standing, we might recommend a sit-to-stand desk or even a sit-to-stand platform so they can alternate between standing and sitting throughout the day. We would maybe recommend computer software. So if someone has a lot of joint pain, pains in their hands, we would recommend software where it's speech to text. And obviously that requires a quieter work environment, because if you're talking, it may be annoying to some of your other work colleagues. But in terms of benefits to the employee and to the organisation, if the employee is comfortable at their workstation, their productivity is going to increase. There's less risk of a physical injury, so there's less risk of absenteeism and decreased productivity for the employer. So overall, it does reduce costs of the organisation. It does foster that feeling within the organisation that employee well-being is important. So we have seen some of the organisations we work with have actually purchased sit-to-stand desks for all of their employees, because they're really seeing the benefit of allowing them to alternate between sitting and standing throughout the day. And as I said earlier, there is cost obviously to the organisation of providing that piece of equipment, but if it's appropriate, we would advise the employee to make a referral to Access to Work to see if they can get funding to have that equipment provided.
I love that universal approach. I saw recently a certain earplug manufacturer, I won't name them, who are doing corporate options so that all employees can have access, which is, it's just making it easy for everybody. So then it doesn't feel like you're asking for the sun and moon just by, if it's already there and available.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I mean, like, I have no musculoskeletal conditions. I can sit comfortably at my desk. But when you sit for a long time, you do tend to, throughout the day, tend to flex a bit more. Your head, neck flexes more, and you do become uncomfortable. So I think, that organisation we're talking about that adopted that approach where all their employees can alternate between sit and standing, I think that's really, really crucial. Other employees, when they see, some employees getting all singing, all dancing chairs and desks, they do feel a bit left out. And you can understand that. Because most workstations will generally have a standard desk and a standard chair. So I think adopting, as you say, that universal approach really is very beneficial.
I was going to say, it also just means that nobody stands out, because sometimes, an employee will go, yeah, that chair would be great, but I don't want to be different to anybody else, or I don't want to be the only one standing in an office. So that, that really helps when it's available for everybody then, because everybody can do it.
And it's going to help with retention for the organisation. There might be a little bit of upfront cost, but there's going to be increased kind of goodwill among employees and a sense of, actually, this organisation cares for me. So this is somebody I want to work for, which is going to save costs in the long run.
And we do see that, definitely. Some of the organisations we work for are really supportive of their staff, and you can see that in the staff. Yeah.
Really important considerations, even from working from home. I'm sure there was a lot of big role for you guys during COVID. And are there many organisations that, bring that into the employees' setting at home?
Yeah, there's a lot of organisations now that do a hybrid approach, which is great. So, some of our referrals would, maybe we'd be recommending a working from home, maybe 1 day a week or 2 days a week for whatever reason. But actually, if it's part of the team anyway, it's not even seen as a reasonable adjustment, because everybody's at home 1 day a week. And you do hear actually that there's lots of companies right across the world, actually, and particularly in bigger cities, where leasing accommodation and office space is really expensive, that they're getting an awful lot of people to work from home. So it's a constant conversation at the moment. And I think you will see a big turn as, as people with health conditions say, I want to work from home before COVID, nobody was allowed to work from home because you were, it was kind of assumed that you were on a jolly and you were kind of doing the housework or you were out having coffee or whatever. But now you can't have that argument because we all had to work from home and work carried on. So I think we've definitely seen an increase in people working from home, on maybe a 2-day-a-week basis or a 1-day-a-week basis. And I think that will definitely continue. And I think from an employer's point of view, they'll have a more difficult argument to say no because it worked for a period of time. But obviously there are jobs that you have to be in the workplace and you have to be face to face. If you can't work from home if you're in a shop. And certainly new recruits actually to teams and companies, they find it more easier to kind of learn on the job if they're in the office with other people who are much more experienced. So, there is obviously, it's, I suppose, again, it comes down to communication, doesn't it? And just getting that right balance for the individual and the employer.
Mm-hmm.
I think from an ergonomic perspective, obviously when COVID hit and people worked from home, it was a very quick transition. And I mean, we had horror stories. We had people, working from, well, most people actually worked from their sofa or their bed. We had people who set up an ironing board and had the chair in front of the ironing board, so really inappropriate workstations. And then, you gradually had to get that message across to employers that actually you have a responsibility to your staff. They are still your employee under the Health and Safety Act. You must provide them with a proper, a desk, a chair. And we are seeing that now, that people have more appropriate workstations in their home.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to 3 years ago when really people were on the sofa, laptops on their knees. So that's positive that they are seeing that it is required both in the workplace and at home.
As an organisation, Occupational Therapy Northern Ireland, have you guys made any changes to your policies or procedures or your work practices with your kind of occupational health hat on? Have you? How are you practicing what you preach?
Well, we bought ourselves new desks and chairs, sit-to-stand desks, and like proper supportive chairs, because we spend so much time sitting when we're doing reports. Some of our reports are so long, depending on what area we work in. We are very passionate about that work-life balance and trying to ensure that we do just stick to our core hours rather than, a bit of work in the morning, some in the afternoon, then working late into night. Because, you're not productive. You're working late at night, you're tired. We just feel it's better if we try and stick to our core hours.
Yeah, no, I think the desks and the chairs were a big thing for us. We were saying like, we're doing this for everybody else. We're not actually looking after ourselves. And I guess in terms of the team that works for us as well, we have a chat with them as well about how they're working at home. Obviously they're all self-employed, so it is up to each individual, but just giving them the advice that we have learned, I guess, really.
You guys are smashing it in the area of occupational health, but you've got lots of other areas to your business as well. What does the future hold for Occupational Therapy Northern Ireland?
Oh, Jen, we can't give away your secrets. No, I'm only joking. I suppose it's kind of more development of the same, really, in terms of networking is a big part. And certainly coming to Christmas and then in January, we always go, we have to network more, because actually, while we network quite a lot, networking is how, your name gets out there and how people hear about you. And certainly, even in the area of occupational health, while we do work directly with a couple of big companies, an awful, I suppose maybe 50% or maybe 40% of our referrals actually comes from independent HR consultants. So, you'd have small businesses who maybe don't have HR directly as part of the company, but they will outsource it when they need it. And they come to us quite a lot with clients, one-off assessment or whatever. So just getting the word out there that actually we're here to help. Lots of people think of HR, everybody kind of knows it because you need the HR for your contract and your working conditions and all of that. But lots of people have said, I didn't realize, there was small occupational health companies out there that can provide these services. So I think every day, they say every day is a school day. So every day is really a networking day. Wouldn't you agree, Margaret, in terms of getting our name out there?
It is, but I think as occupational therapists, it's very difficult for us to go out and network. When you worked in a hospital, you were almost cocooned. You had your OT colleagues, you had your multidisciplinary team colleagues, and you didn't have to really network. You spoke with your patients, you spoke with their family, but it's very different when you're independent and you're speaking with businesses. And that's what I hope maybe in 2024, I get more confident doing that. Like even in front of a camera, social media, people are saying you have to be the face, whereas I would very gladly hide behind the camera and just put pictures up and videos. So I hope maybe we get a bit more confident doing that. I would struggle with that. You know.
And we have seen, Margaret, haven't we, that you definitely get more interaction when our faces are there, whether even if just a photograph, but certainly videos, you do get an awful lot more interaction when your face is there. And Jen, you're the same. I'm sure you see that. Yeah. But it's that independent and that business head on, isn't it? Whereas you didn't have that in the health service, where you're constantly basically looking for the next client. Because whereas when you're in the health service, the patients come to you, and it's very different. Yeah.
It just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah.
So we're learning to sell ourselves.
And your brand name is brilliant. It is what it is. It's Occupational Therapy Northern Ireland, and it's very easy to find you guys. So I think that's perfect name choice.
Yeah, believe it or not, we actually had that years before we ever officially came together, didn't we? We bought the domain and everything because we'd been working and helping one another and supporting one another for years before we officially came together. And the domain was out there, and we went, you know what, we're going to get that now before somebody else grabs it. So yeah, you're looking for an occupational therapist in Northern Ireland, you Google it, and there you go.
Yeah, brilliant.
So we'll put out your contact details in the show notes. So if anybody wants to network with Margaret and Corinna, get in touch. It sounds like you take referrals from employers and employees, or anybody who's looking for a bit of support, they can contact you directly.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your experience with us. It's been really insightful, and it's really exciting to see OTs pushing into areas that we should absolutely be in, but maybe we don't always have the confidence to move into those areas. So thank you for leading the way in that.
Thanks.
That's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it. Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trechek.
And myself, Aileen Rutledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.